Family members telling me that Janet Morris was a God-fearing woman. They say she loved life and was devoted to her family. She was diagnosed with cancer just months ago. Janet Morris's loved ones dealt a double blow. A day after the 62-year-old woman was found stabbed to death at her Stone Mountain residence.
My mom was a lively person. She would help anybody.
A family member who asked us not to show her face told me Morris was a mother of 5 and a grandmother. She had lost 3 children in recent years and was battling cancer.
She's been through a lot with the deaths of 3 of her children, but through it all, she always praised God and kept God first.
Imagine losing 3 children, one ripped away by violence, one taken too soon by tragedy, and one who vanished without a trace. You bury your pain, you pray for strength, and you hold on to the last child you have left, believing love can't hurt you again. But then, love becomes the knife that breaks you. This is not fiction. This is the haunting story of Janet Morris, a mother who survived every kind of heartbreak life could deliver, only to be destroyed by the one person she loved the most. She was the kind of woman who refused to give up, who carried faith like a shield even when the world had taken everything. But one quiet afternoon in Gwinnett County, Georgia, that faith met its final test. Police arrived to a scene no heart could bear. Janet Morris, the mother who had already buried 3 of her children, now lay lifeless in her own home. And the only suspect standing over her was her daughter. Before we continue, I want to take a moment to appreciate all my amazing supporters. Much love to each of you. If you haven't already, please subscribe, hit that like button, and drop your comment below. Now, let's get back to the story. Janet Morris was simply a quiet, kind-hearted woman whose entire life revolved around her children. She was the kind of mother everyone in the neighborhood admired, always smiling, always helping, always putting her family before herself. But behind that gentle smile was a story carved from pain. Her life had been shaped by heartbreak so deep it could silence even the strongest soul. Years earlier, she lost her first son in a brutal, senseless act of violence that shattered her world and stole the light from her eyes. Not long after, her second child, a beautiful daughter, died suddenly from a mysterious medical complication that no doctor could explain, a loss that left her questioning everything she believed about fairness and faith. Then came the disappearance of her third child, a young boy whose absence turned her life into an endless waiting game, every phone call and knock at the door filling her with hope that never came true. That mystery lingered like a ghost in her home, haunting her every thought, every breath. Family members said she was never the same after that. They remember the nights she would sit by the window long after midnight, whispering her children's names into the darkness as if her words could somehow reach them. She kept their photos on every wall, not because she wanted to remember, but because she couldn't bear to forget. The laughter that once filled her home had long faded into a heavy silence that hung in every room. Through all that pain, only one child remained, Brittany Morris. Janet clung to her like a lifeline, pouring every ounce of love she had left into her, seeing in her not just a daughter but her final connection to motherhood itself. But grief, no matter how strong the love, changes people. It can make the heart fragile and the soul weary. It can harden even the most tender spirit and build invisible walls between those who love each other most. For Janet, love became both her strength and her weakness, and for Brittany, it became a weight she didn't know how to carry. Losing 3 children changed everything about Janet Morris. It altered the rhythm of her life, the tone of her voice, even the way she looked at the world. Every sunrise reminded her of what she had lost, and every sunset reminded her that they were never coming back. She began journaling her pain in quiet notebooks filled with raw emotions and confessions that no one was ever meant to read. Some of her entries were only a few words, written through tears that smudged the ink. I should have been the one to go, not them. Her home, once warm and welcoming, began to feel heavy. Visitors often said it wasn't the furniture or the walls that carried the weight. It was the air itself, thick with grief and memories she refused to release. Her faith never completely left her, but her heart was exhausted. She stopped attending the community gatherings she once loved, no longer opened her doors to neighbors, and rarely picked up the phone when friends called. Some days, she would sit for hours in silence, staring at old photographs of her children, her trembling fingers tracing their faces as if she could feel them again. Still, despite her own heartbreak, Janet never stopped being a mother. Her thoughts constantly circled back to Brittany, her last living child, her final hope. She poured every ounce of her remaining strength into loving her, sometimes too much, trying to protect her from a world she no longer trusted. Family members said Janet spoiled Brittany not out of indulgence, but desperation. She was trying to heal through her, to love her way out of grief, but Brittany didn't see it that way. To her, that love felt suffocating, like living inside a home built from sorrow. She wanted freedom, to breathe, to live beyond the shadow of her mother's sadness. Janet, on the other hand, wanted connection, closeness, and peace. But peace doesn't grow in the soil of unresolved pain. Both mother and daughter were bleeding from different wounds, neither able to see that the other was just as broken. And in that house, filled with quiet prayers and lingering ghosts, love began to twist into tension. Words that were never spoken became barriers. Emotions that were never expressed became invisible weapons. And the silence that once comforted them turned into the sound of a family falling apart. Neighbors remember the Morris home as quiet, hauntingly quiet, the kind of silence that made you uneasy when you passed by. The laughter that once echoed through the hallways had long vanished, replaced by muffled voices, slammed doors, and the occasional sound of someone crying when they thought no one could hear. Those who lived nearby said it was a house that felt heavy, like it was holding secrets the walls couldn't contain. Behind those closed doors, tension brewed between Janet and Brittany. Their arguments weren't fueled by hatred, but by the unspoken pain that neither could escape. Janet's grief had become a shadow that followed her everywhere, and Brittany, young and restless, didn't know how to live under it. She wanted to breathe without feeling her mother's sorrow pressing against her chest. To her, it felt like she was being punished for surviving. Like every time her mother looked at her, she saw ghosts of the ones she had lost. Friends of Brittany would later recall how she sometimes confided that her mom lived in the past, and that being in that house was too much to handle. They said she loved her mother, but the sadness was too thick, too constant, too consuming. For Janet, though, Brittany wasn't just her daughter. She was her reason to keep waking up. Every morning, every prayer, every plan she made was tied to the hope that Brittany would find happiness, that she would break free from the darkness that had swallowed their family. But love under grief is fragile. It bends until it starts to break. The tension grew worse with time. Mother and daughter went days without speaking, their silence sharper than words ever could be. They'd pass each other in the hallway without making eye contact, share meals in silence, and sometimes only communicate through a closed bedroom door. Yet even after the harsh words and slammed doors, Janet's love didn't fade. Late at night, she would quietly walk to Brittany's room, peek through the doorway just to make sure she was safe, and whisper a prayer before returning to her own bed. She believed that time would heal them, that one day her daughter would understand that her love came from fear, the fear of losing the only child she had left. But what Janet didn't know was that her greatest fear was already unfolding. The danger she had always imagined coming from outside her home was growing inside it, slowly, quietly, and fatally. Soon, the silence that filled that house would be broken one last time by screams no one could forget. It was a quiet, seemingly ordinary afternoon on the 3,000 block of Dishong Drive in Gwinnett County, Georgia, the kind of day neighbors barely noticed, the kind of day that felt safe. The calendar marked August 2024, a month like any other, until the air was pierced by shouting, first loud, then shrill, then panicked screams that sent chills down the spines of those nearby. Phones were grabbed. Someone dialed 911. Within minutes, police officers arrived, lights flashing, urgency in their steps. The calm of the neighborhood shattered. The front door of the Morris home was unlocked, almost as if the tragedy had been waiting to be discovered. Inside, the scene was horrifying. 62-year-old Janet Morris, a woman who had endured more pain than most could imagine, lay lifeless on the floor, her body marked by multiple stab wounds, the very tool of her death, a kitchen knife that had once been part of her home's daily life. And there, still inside the house, was 33-year-old Brittany Morris, shocked, trembling, her clothes and hands streaked with blood, the reality of what had just happened settling over her in a terrifying, suffocating wave. Officers quickly detained her. The initial report labeled it a domestic-related homicide, a phrase too clinical for a tragedy that carried decades of sorrow, loss, and heartbreak within its walls. To neighbors and friends who knew the family, this was more than a crime scene. It was the devastating conclusion to a life defined by unimaginable grief and endless love.
But through it all, she always praised God and kept God first.
Janet was a very nice person, very godly woman. You know, she was going through some health.
Investigators processed the scene, took statements, and later booked Brittany into Gwinnett County Jail, charging her with felony murder, aggravated assault, and possession of a knife during the commission of a felony. The woman Janet had once called her miracle child, the daughter she had poured her remaining love into after losing 3 children, was now accused of taking the very life she had devoted herself to protecting. A mother who had survived every storm, who had buried 3 of her children and fought to keep the last one close, had fallen victim not to fate or strangers, but to the one she loved most. Janet Morris was never just a name in a newspaper or a fleeting story on the evening news. She was a woman who had devoted every heartbeat, every breath, every ounce of her being to her family. Friends, those closest to Janet say she fought a quiet, private battle with depression, a shadow that followed her through her days and lingered in the corners of her home. She didn't seek therapy or professional help. She believed in prayer, in faith, in lighting candles for her lost children and keeping their rooms untouched for years, sacred spaces frozen in time. Motherhood was her purpose. When she lost them, she lost a piece of herself, yet she held on because of Brittany, the last thread connecting her to life and love. In her final years, she attempted to rebuild, seeking small joys and glimpses of hope, attending grief support groups, planning to move to a smaller, more manageable home, dreaming of the day she might become a grandmother, envisioning a life that could finally offer peace. But the world had other plans, and no one could have predicted that the story of Janet Morris, a woman who had survived every imaginable heartbreak, would end not with healing, but with a final, shattering tragedy, a heartbreak born from the one person she had loved most, the daughter she had fought so hard to protect. The arrest of Brittany Morris sent shockwaves through Gwinnett County and beyond. Court proceedings drew intense public attention, with neighbors, friends, and family filling the courtroom, some in disbelief, some in tears, all grappling with how a mother and daughter relationship could end in such horror. Prosecutors painted a stark picture of the crime, detailing the evidence and the timeline, while defense attorneys attempted to provide context about Brittany's state of mind, the tension at home, and the lifelong shadow of grief that hung over the Morris family. Every day in court was a reminder of the complexity of human emotion, grief, and the destructive power of unresolved trauma. Families who had followed Janet's story felt the mix of anger, sorrow, and helplessness that comes with tragedies that hit so close to home. Outside the courtroom, the aftermath rippled through the community. Friends and neighbors organized vigils and memorials for Janet, lighting candles and leaving flowers at her former home, honoring a woman whose life had been defined by love and loss. Support groups reached out to Brittany's peers, opening conversations about mental health, grief, and the importance of recognizing warning signs in families experiencing trauma. For many, this tragedy became a painful but crucial lesson about the hidden struggles within households, the silent battles that sometimes escalate into irreversible tragedy. Through it all, Janet's story sparked awareness. Local media and advocacy groups highlighted the need for community support for grieving families, emphasizing that no one should suffer in silence, that early intervention, counseling, and compassion can prevent heartbreak from turning into disaster. Her life, though ended violently, became a catalyst for change, teaching others about the fragility of life, the importance of mental health, and the depth of love a mother carries even in the face of unimaginable loss. Janet's memory lives on not just in the hearts of those who knew her, but in the lessons her story leaves behind, urging families, communities, and authorities to look closer, listen deeper, and act before silence becomes deadly. Janet Morris once said, "Pain is not the end. It's just proof that you loved her story is more than a tragedy. It's a lesson about grief unhealed, trauma unspoken, and love stretched to its limits." On Dishong Drive, her home stands silent, a monument to a mother who gave everything, loved without bounds, and whose life ended in heartbreak, leaving a legacy of warning, reflection, and remembrance. Help us make this story count. Like this video, share it, and drop a comment for Janet Morris below. Every story we tell keeps their memory alive. This is Viral Crime Stories, where truth still has a voice.